I'm pleased to introduce the Honorable Paul Lawrence, the presiding judge of the Goffstown District Court in my home state of New Hampshire, a position he has served in since 1988. Judge Lawrence received his BA degree at the University of Denver and also his Juris Doctorate from the University of Denver College of Law. Throughout his impressive career, Judge Lawrence has worked as an advocate for true social justice for juveniles with a real understanding of the special considerations that must be taken into account when addressing youth in our judicial system. In my state of New Hampshire, Judge Lawrence has served since 1991 on the Board of Directors for Plus Time New Hampshire, which provides technical assistance to organizations and communities for the development of after-school programs, and we know how essential they are for juveniles. Since 1994, he has been a member of the State Advisory Group on Juvenile Justice, which oversees the development of statewide juvenile justice programs. He's also served as the co-chair of the New Hampshire Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative, an organization involved in statewide comprehensive detention reform efforts. The judge's efforts on the national level include his tenure as chair of the Coalition for Juvenile Justice, his continued service as a member of the National Steering Committee of the Coalition, and further, since 1993, he has served as a member of the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. And we can certainly see where his talent and where he chooses to place his heart's interest for the interests of the juveniles, and we certainly thank you for your service, and we're delighted to have you here today. Thank you.
It's my distinct honor to have been asked by Chairwoman McCarthy to speak on behalf of the Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention Act. I began hearing juvenile cases almost 30 years ago with the belief that the greatest cure for delinquency is maturation. At that time, before technology provided images of the brain that allow us to see its gradual development, extending well into the mid-20s, it was clear to me that the needs, thoughts, motivations, and behavior of youth differ greatly from those of fully mature adults. Now, advancements in neuroimagery enable us to take a look at the actual physical development and transformation of the brain in all stages of life. During adolescence, several areas of the brain go through their final developmental stages and develop greater complexity, which in turn affects thinking, behavior, and potential for learning and rehabilitation. Confirmation of my maturation theory, and it's not really mine alone, others have espoused the theory as well, as can be found in the business community, particularly auto insurance. And many of us have experienced insuring a son or daughter under age 25, but it's quite amazing. At age 25, the actuaries who work for the insurance companies figured out that the risk diminishes, and they cut the premium in half. They understood something, perhaps, about risk and impulsive behavior long before we thought of it in terms of even juvenile justice. Judges on the juvenile bench possess considerable power over the life pathways of young people and their families, particularly those that are vulnerable, troubled, and fragile. Given this power, what judges do may prove productive and helpful, or regrettably cause unintended harm. Every time a judge shepherds a young person through the juvenile justice system, he must be certain that all steps have been taken to enhance the youth's competencies before imposition of predominantly retributive measures. In fact, if judges, as well as congressional and federal decision makers, are to do what is best for children and youth involved in the courts, we would make a primary commitment in juvenile justice, much like the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm. Included in such a commitment would be the following precepts, all of which are part of the original thinking that underlies the JJDP Act. We should strive to keep children and youth out of the court system and out of institutional settings, particularly lockups, and whenever possible, at home or close to home, school, and community. We should do everything possible to ensure that any and all court involvement by youth and families is appropriately limited in scope and effective in producing healthy outcomes for involved youth. We must ensure age-appropriate sanctions and supports and court services, as well as systems that treat children and youth in ways that are based on the best of what we know about adolescent development, brain science, and the principles of positive youth development. Research supported by the MacArthur Foundation has shown that different brain capacities mature along different timetables. Competence-related abilities mature by age 16, yet capacities relevant to decision about criminal culpability, risk-taking, are still maturing into young adulthood. Second, adolescents are responsible for their behavior, but not as responsible as adults. Third, adolescents are still works in progress. Adolescent brain development science highlights how critical the core protections of the JJDP Act are in keeping status offending, non-criminal youth out of lockups and placing clear restrictions on children and youth in adult jails, as well as ensuring that we do not needlessly sweep children of color into the juvenile justice system because of systemic and societal racism. Furthermore, the JJDP Act can be improved based on the best of what we know by directing Title II, state formula funds, and Title V, state and local prevention funds, to programs that prevent repeated system involvement and show excellent results in restoring young people to productive home and community life. Examples of such programs are the Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative spearheaded by the Casey Foundation, Restorative Justice sponsored in part by OJJDP, and Sanctions and Graduated Sanctions, an active program of the National Council of Juvenile Family Court Judges. Regarding use of federal funds under the JJDP Act, Congress should strongly consider prohibiting the use of federal funds for ineffective and damaging approaches, such as highly punitive models shown to increase rather than decrease rearrest and reoffense, including boot camps, scared straight programs, excessive use of physical restraint, force and punishment, over-reliance on transfer and waiver, and the building of large residential institutions. Since my time is almost up, I will conclude my remarks and refer you to my lengthier written testimony, the citations as part of that testimony, and accompanying publications. And thank you very much.